Hello, everyone. It's Matt Moshe. Welcome back to Product for Product. Thanks for tuning in this week. We're excited to have Aram Melkoumov on the show to discuss his journey in product management, along with his use of various product stacks. Welcome to the show, Aram. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, great to be here, Matt and Moshe.
Hey, Aram. Hey, Matt. So can you maybe just introduce yourself and
Sure.
What you're doing and who is Crowdlinker and etc.
Sure. Awesome. I'm Aram Melkoumov. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Crowdlinker. We're a Toronto and Barcelona-based digital product innovation firm. We work with our clients in different industries, verticals, whether it's a startup all the way to scale up or enterprise, on helping them figure out what products to build, how to launch them, and taking them to market. So we do everything from product strategy, validation, MVPs, prototypes. We do design, UX, UI services, as well as software engineering. And so we are an end-to-end product studio.
Perfect. So it's full service, basically.
That's right. Yeah.
And one of the reasons that we brought you on the show is that we really like your perspective, or anyone that is working in agency have a different perspective about the product stacks that product managers are using to build the products. Because I've heard it from many other people working in agencies, and Matt, you're also in an agency these days.
Right.
So you have different clients. You will either give them recommendation for specific products, or you work with the products they already selected, or they tell you, oh, we are working on this, we have to work with this product. So let's delve into that a bit, about this experience.
Sure. Yeah. We just to give a bit of background, actually, maybe first. So we initially started off as a SaaS startup building our own products. So we worked within our own stacks. It was our own per se. So we had full control over it. And then about 5-6 years ago, we were graduating from a well-known startup incubator program called the DMZ. And it was there that we started working with our first few startup clients. And we quickly kind of realized that, not everybody does, build product the same way we do, from process, methodology, stacks, and things like that. And so over the last, I would say, I think 5-6 years, we've built over 50 products now to date to market with, I want to say, maybe around 25-30 clients, all in different industries, verticals, from fintech, insurance tech, media, health, e-commerce, you name it. I think we've done everything at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've seen is that between a startup and a scale up, you predominantly see a certain type of stack being used. But when we start working with enterprises, you start seeing more enterprisey type of software that is being used in their environments, everything from design, development to engineering. We, as a business, initially actually starting off using the same stack that we had when we were a product company, building our own as a SaaS service business. It was predominantly using Atlassian suite. So everything from Jira, Bitbucket, Confluence, you name it, we were like invested into that suite of the ecosystem. And obviously we use a wide variety of other tools now in our tool set. But that was what our go-to was. A lot of the business was operating through that. Over time, what we've seen is, like, in order to properly get the most use out of Jira, for example, or Confluence, you basically need to have like a dedicated person or like a part-time person that is managing that setup, that environment, the structure of the processes, the workflows. And it just got to the point where it's like, became very rigid and not, it was quite slow, to be honest, in terms of what we wanted to do. And so it was about, I think, a year and a half ago where my team members started piloting out on some products, a product called Clubhouse, which is now called shortcut.com.
Yes. Yeah, I think they had no choice but changing the name because of the other Clubhouse.
Exactly. Yeah. And so the one thing we saw right away was the simplicity of how it functions. It was super fast, powerful, yet gave us exactly what we needed. And over time, we gradually weaned off of Atlassian. I mean, we still use Bitbucket, but we're considering moving on, to GitHub, where a lot of our other clients are on. And Yeah, I mean, their roadmap is pretty aggressive. They've rolled out a bunch of new features. They have a roadmap function as well now. They're basically also creating out their own version of Confluence as well. And so with Shortcut now, we have all of our clients and dedicated, if they're in their own dedicated workspaces. We have one organization, which is Crowdlinker, but we have dozens of different workspaces for each client. And the nice thing is that in Shortcut specifically, you could break out different workflow parameters into two business types. So you could have business workflows, design workflows, engineering workflows, all with their own states and projects within each workspace. So right away, we saw immediate value in it because in Jira, to accomplish what Shortcut had, especially at the time, they had that new Jira that they were rolling out, which was full of issues and didn't have the full feature set of, classic Jira, that were like, you know what, this totally makes sense. So we totally moved over and have been using it now 100% on all of our projects. And it's great also to share the workspace with our clients as observers or sometimes like actual editors so that we're truly feel like we're one team that's working on it.
Right.
And so as a product studio, we really pride ourselves on how we integrate or embed ourselves into a lot of the organizations we work with. So very kind of plug and play. Our tech stacks are also pretty adaptable. I'm happy to talk about some of those other ones that we use across the board, other than just Shortcut, which is what we use for like product management or task management, so to speak, and story management.
Yeah, let me ask you a question about this one specifically, and then we can move to some other products in the stack. So I've been on the other side of the agency. I never worked for an agency, but I had projects in my past that I worked with agencies on doing different things. And there was always that, question or challenge. Are they going to use our own management system? So at the time it was Jira or whatever it is, or are we going to use theirs? So how does that usually work for you? Because based on what you described, you have your own on Shortcut. All the clients are actually getting some access to it in some way to your project. But don't they sometimes want you to use their system, like their Jira or their whatever it is?
Yeah, it does come up. It's something that we ask about in the whole pre-sales process in terms of what is your tech stack, what is your product stack, what is your marketing stack. We ask all these questions. And on select clients, obviously, with some more established scale-ups and enterprises, they already have a defined stack, right? And so in those situations, depending on what it is that we're doing in that specific engagement, like are we working on extending out their core product suite, or are we working on complementary or secondary applications that are outside of the core? So depending on that, we decide on how and what tools we use. So like, for example, sometimes a company can have a web application and they hire us to build out a lot of their mobile app experiences. So in that specific example, it's more clear cut in terms of like, there is nothing that exists currently on the mobile app side. So we are kind of coming in with a clean slate, so to speak.
Right.
And in those situations, at the end of the project, we do migrate and hand over everything that we've done regardless. But in those situations, the preference is kind of like up to you, like whatever you work best in, just invite us in. However, when we're working on like something core, then yeah, we typically get onboarded and ramp up on their existing tool set or and processes, so that we get acquainted and get familiar with like how they do stories and how they do epics, how they do sprint planning and whatnot, and milestones. So it's case by case. Like we have a team right now that's working on a really large enterprise engagement, and they're using Azure DevOps. And there's we have I think 4 people on that project, and they have a very large e-commerce site that they're building on Salesforce Commerce Cloud. And there's like a lot of other dependencies with Salesforce, and they're using the whole suite of applications. So like we just had to get comfortable with Azure DevOps, which to be honest, when I hear from my PMs is not the best
That's Moshe
software.
That's actually the one I'm using right now.
No.
And that's really interesting. I used Jira for years in its different incarnations and versions. I even implemented it myself at one place and then gave it to some other people to make it even better. But when I started using Azure DevOps, I was like very suspicious about it. I would say, but we are a Microsoft house, so we have licensing. Everything is Microsoft, so it made sense to us to use it. And I was actually positively surprised about it when I started using it. So I can't really say that it's better than Jira, but I can't even say that it's worse than Jira. I know with Jira, a lot of people like to say that it's a love-hate relationship. I've heard it before many times, but that actually leads me to my next question to you, because you're seeing all of these products. So in an agency, you have this opportunity to actually have exposure and work with similar products or different products for the same type of job to be done, if I may. And it really puts you in that position that you can actually evaluate them and say in a better way which one is better than the other. Because for me, it's like only during my job progression in different companies that I use them, different ones. Because I didn't use Jira for the last 2 years, maybe there is new stuff I don't even know about Jira. But for you, it's almost like a living thing that you continue using them. Yeah, so I was just wondering, how does that make your work better, I guess, that you actually know all these different type of products and have more exposure to them?
Yeah, good question. I think it's as a studio, like we have to be always, in my opinion, always at the forefront of new frameworks, new tools, new software. And there's always so much stuff that's coming out. And so we're pretty agnostic when it comes to certain things. But like, for example, on the design side, we used to use, Adobe Creative Suite earlier on. Then we went to, I think it was Sketch. So then we used Sketch, and then we used Zeppelin. And then we went to InVision Studio. And then Figma came along and started taking a lot of people's attention. So we're like, let's try this. And in every actual scenario, it was always a team member driven approach. So like a design team wants to try out Figma. We're like, okay, cool. Let's give it a go. Let's try it out, see how it works, get the team familiar with it. And then if we love it, we make some sort of like decision-making matrix in terms of like, okay, do we like it better than InVision Studio? Why? Okay, justifiable reasons. And then we just like go and, move everything over. Figma was like a great example because it basically consolidated like 3 products into one, or 3 separate softwares into one. And I got tired of like, from my team hearing about all the issues with InVision Studio and stuff like that. So like for me, it was a no-brainer. But it is essentially a team member-led initiative, which then we pilot out the software around for. And then if we like it, then we kind of adopt it. We're always also trying out like other types of new and growing kind of ecosystem things, like the whole no-code, low-code space.
Right.
We've brought on a team member now who does projects in Webflow. We're trying out now things using Bubble app, which allows you to create applications in a no-code kind of like environment. We've also tried something called Anima app, a New York-based startup, which really got our attention because you're able to go and design out in Figma and then integrate it with Anima app and then deploy it to a live site. And it basically transcodes the designs into HTML and CSS using, you could create component libraries in Figma. And that was like for us like a big game changer, because then we could prototype so much quicker without having to get a developer involved.
Yeah, that sounds really cool.
My experience coming from working in an agency as well, we're allowed to use various tools. So whatever kind of tool we prefer. And so there is the ability to use a bunch of different things. I was curious how you kind of get the team to migrate to one platform where people might be like, well, I don't want to go to the other platform. If this platform is working, do you encounter that?
Yeah, occasionally, yes. We try to get the support of all the team members to go and adopt something. If somebody is like against it, we want to kind of know why, and go through that process of like understanding the rationale, like pros, cons, so that we could get a better understanding. it does make our lives a lot easier at the end of the day when we do use one specific, software like a Figma for design, so that things aren't fragmented. But sometimes, I don't know, some of our clients want to use what is that? Axure, or it's like a design programming tool or a design software, and it's a bit old. Figma allows us to do everything from mood boards to wireframes to high fidelity to prototypes. And the best part about it is that it's so collaborative. Like we invite our clients into Figma, so they see everything. We break out everything by page, whether that's like a persona driven approach or it's phase-based approach, from like wireframes to high fidelity to the UI kit to the design system or whatever it is. It's all in one place. So we've never really had, to be honest, an issue where somebody's like an outlier and doesn't want to get behind something. We always try to use like more modern tools that the team is always keen on experimenting with, so that they could expand their own kind of like knowledge base, and professionally they could use tools that the market is adopting at a high rate. So yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's very few select cases where we've had where some team members were hesitant.
Yeah, because I come from an enterprise background, so obviously within an enterprise you're locked into whatever they provide.
Yeah.
And so that's a tough world to go from, where then you wind up in another world where, hey, you can use whatever you like. And just trying to get everybody on that same page to say, okay, we're going to head in this direction. It's interesting to hear from other people about that.
Yeah, I think it also goes to something that Aram mentioned before about the alignment that you do with your client when you start the project, about the specific tool sets and stuff like that. So that could be also part of it, that with different clients come different things. And then I guess that alignment can actually help, align people to use the same product rather than different products. Just a thought, right? But yeah, from enterprise experience, I know that once we choose a product, then to change it to another product could be really hard sometimes.
Yeah, it's a hard sell.
Enterprises is a whole other ballpark. Yeah, we've been trying to get Figma to be used by one of our larger enterprise clients, and they just they're just so set. There's just no way, right? Even though it's gonna enhance everybody's experience, like us, the agency that we're working with, the client directly, it just gives everybody a lot more visibility and line of sight into everything that's happening. But instead, like they use these older, clunky, very fragmented kind of approaches, and so you need to basically spend weeks onboarding to understand what's going on. Like where's what, instead of just being able to start producing value. So it is challenging.
What about things like, data analytics? I know Matt loves to hear about those things. So I'm asking it on your behalf, Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
But that to me, correct me if I'm wrong there, both of you, that to me sounds like even more complicated one to choose, because it's not just about how I come up with the design or how I manage my project. It's also how I consume the data, and it's a kind of a long-term investment about the type of consumption of data and making it available for everyone in the organization. So I just wonder how that complexity there is taking place in making those product decisions.
Good question. I don't have a lot of specific examples, but I could tell you about some of the tools that we have used and continue to use. So let me kind of maybe split into different things. It depends on what kind of data analytics. So like, for example, when we do large scale marketing website projects, typically, we use Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager for being able to capture like the engagement and the time on site and all that kind of stuff. We started using something called Google Data Studio as well in order to funnel data points from different places. It could be anything from Google Analytics, Salesforce to HubSpot, you name it. It goes, a reporting into that specific software. When it comes to kind of product, we've used a mixed bag of different things. Like Hotjar, we've used many times. That's for a mix. You could use it for a marketing website or a product. It allows us to see interactions, hotspots, click-through rates, and like their sessions are recorded, so we could always like see what people are clicking on and like what they're doing, which is very useful.
Right.
We've used Intercom in order to create better understanding of like the journey flows when people go and sign up and they get presented to a dashboard or, to get some information. And Intercom does a good job of, having event-based triggers in order to present the right notification at the right time, whether that's in-app or whether that's, email or whatnot. And then you could see exactly what's happening, with all your user base, like how many people have completed X task in the process and whatnot. There's also tools like Mixpanel, which we use. There's Segment. There's a whole bunch. Like I think there's quite a bit of different options out there. We use Optimizely and VWO for any kind of A/B testing. In those specific type of like data analytic software, those are things that are more, I think, in the control of the clients. So like, when we get involved, they typically already have some sort of tool set in terms of how they do analytics around versus us starting off with, like, say, a new startup and they have nothing. And that's where we're able to present the suggestions that we want to use. But I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to what do we want to report on? Why do we care about certain data points? Where are we going to be gathering from? How are we going to be representing it? For reporting purposes? Is it visual? Like, is it just number driven? And these are all kind of factors that we try to figure out when we're building a product, because at the end of the day, some stakeholder somewhere needs to know, are we hitting our kind of North Star metric, whatever that is, where we set out to accomplish. So the tool set in those, there's such a high abundance of them, I think, in the market compared to like, there's not that many variations of good versions of like a Jira or, a shortcut or a DevOps, right? But there is a lot of things that you can consider for data analytics. I mean, the big players are obviously like, companies like Mixpanel that have grown and perfected this. But then on the enterprise side, there's, I think, Tableau and a whole bunch of other ones. That's like in a whole different other realm. Salesforce has their own as well. So yeah, I mean, just kind of, you got to pick your poison. There's like really expensive ones. There's ones which are more startup friendly in terms of pricing as well.
Right. And I use Power BI in
Power BI,
where I work now. So we can embed Power BI within an application for an enterprise or whatnot. And typically the enterprise may already have it because it's part of the Microsoft suite of tools. Tableau being more expensive, they probably would have had to go out and source that. So, but yeah, when it comes down to it, when you're working with a client, you have to think about their data, and they've collected it and you're utilizing it to build the product. Whenever you're doing analytics, you have to go whatever they're comfortable with,
exactly.
Especially like in healthcare realm.
For HIPAA compliance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Power BI is a big one, obviously. Sorry, I forgot to mention that one. But like, it also, you brought up a good point. It kind of also depends, like, especially for enterprises, like, what are you committed to? Like, are you committed to Microsoft? If you're committed to, Microsoft, then you're basically using Office, you're using SharePoint, you're using Azure, Active Directory, and then Power BI. It makes sense to use. But if you're like non-committed to that kind of ecosystem, then you have a wide variety of different tools at your mercy that you could use. But even with like some companies, like with Shopify and other companies like that, it also depends. Even companies like Amazon, it depends on the department. If like that team or that R&D team is building out a new product, like they have a lot more control, I would say, than a team that's working on a core product in order to go and use other tools. And if that tool, what I've seen, or that product outside of the core offering becomes successful in terms of it validated its purpose and it has growth, it has revenue potential, then it becomes an exercise of like migrating that tool and how do we integrate it into our product suite. And then it's more of an integration with that existing stack that they want to use.
Excellent point, because when you're working with accounting, finance, you might be running into some, we have to get these reports out. We rely on this tool to do that, and trying to get them to switch to a new thing when they have deadlines to report on accounting and finance. That's really hard to make them switch. But if you're working with marketing and sales, they're like, hey, I need a tool that's going to make this much better to do this. So yeah, excellent point for sure.
And what's also interesting about this point is that we don't necessarily have to find the best solution for everyone right up front. First of all, we validate that the product actually has merit and people are going to use it and whatever. So we build it with maybe less expensive platforms or whatever. And then once it's actually validated and there is traction and we can make money out of it or whatever, to upgrade it to the rest of the stack. So that's also really interesting point there. Now, many of the products that you mentioned before, we either had a podcast episode for, or we are planning to have one in the future. We want to do a series about NoCode and also about A/B testing products and stuff like that. So actually, it would be interesting. Maybe one of your product managers at Crowdlinker will want to join us for one of those if they have that specific experience. Sure. Because we always looking for new guests, and sometimes it's not that easy.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to speak to our product team and see who would want to talk about it. There's so much new products coming out all the time. It's so hard to keep up with it. But the one that is the main trend that's really been capturing my eye specifically in like, selfishly, because I look at it, I'm like, oh, wow, that could totally disrupt my business, perspective, is the whole no-code, low-code space. I
agree.
And there's a bunch of companies that have been successful in terms of attracting users who want to just be able to try to do, essentially try to do this themselves, right?
Yeah.
The funny thing is that, there are these tools that can do it. But what we've seen is that people still come back to companies like us because they lack the strategy in terms of actually figuring this out and figuring out how to do it, what they should be doing, how they should be doing it.
So the product management aspect of it is really
valuable.
And Moshe and I mentioned that too. I love the no-code movement. I'm a big proponent of that. I like that. But we talked about where some of it is from a development standpoint, you can be boxed into it. It might not have the exact amount of customability that like an enterprise would want. So I think that might be a limitation when you come to a large scale business.
Exactly, right? Like in many ways, my limitations that I see with it is it's a fantastic approach to do when you want to create an MVP. Or a prototype of something, right?
Exactly.
To get to market, get users buy-in, and hopefully get some revenue. But then once you start looking at the scalability of it, they're not really built for that. And some of them that I speak to, like, say that their claim is that it is super scalable, but not really, because like when you get to a certain point, I think you want to have that ability to go and customize certain aspects yourself, and that's where I think ultimately, for the time being, production level grade application still needs to be done the normal way, the way it's being done right now.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think it's also the control, not just the scalability. So relying on a third party that you have no idea whether they will, continue or not for your business, I think there is a high risk there.
That's a good point too.
Yeah, and just on that point, if I may, I've spoken to a few people now at companies like Amazon and Shopify, and I was blown away when they told me that they use almost zero external software to power a lot of initiatives in the company. Like, for example, Amazon built out their whole entirely custom HRIS solution, which does everything from hiring, meeting notes of one-on-ones. Everything is totally custom, even for recruiting purposes. And I'm like, holy shit, why would you do that? And it's for control, right? And I had the same conversation with somebody at Shopify who runs product operations, and he said, he used to work in larger companies as well, and he's like, well, just think about it, right? How can a company of that size actually depend on another software to do such mission critical stuff? Like, it just makes zero sense. They will go and spend time, millions of dollars, just to have it to be within their own wheelhouse.
But I think they can afford it at this level. I don't know if many organizations can actually afford something like that. So that's really is the balance there. And when we were also looking for different guests from different companies, I heard the same thing. Not so much. I mean, when you told me about the HR at Amazon, that's actually blown my mind, because I didn't even think about that. But even just the product product stack. So like A/B testing or experimentation platforms or things like that. We heard from other guests that in their organization, companies like LinkedIn, they build it in-house because they don't want to rely on other platforms for that, and they have full control, and they also can make it work in the best for their needs. So that's also another thing there.
Exactly. And I think it's just they want total and complete control over the whole product. And even though it costs them probably an obscene amount of money to do it, instead of going and working with a startup, and this has like always been a thing for us. We used to run a monthly event series called Innovation TO, which brought people, every month from a different industry. And there was always one or two people from the enterprise, and then one or two people from a startup in that same industry. And the whole point was like, how can startups and enterprises work well together? Or how can enterprises use or benefit from those startups in terms of their software in order to get, a leg up with their competitors or whatnot. And so it's tough. Like as a startup, it's so hard to try to get buy-in. The sales cycles are just so long to get your product into an enterprise space that so many hurdles to overcome that you just might run out of cash and bandwidth, eventually at some point. And so like, it's not really like, I wish that more enterprises will eventually be more open to using existing or probably better versions of their own software that they have that's homegrown, which are external, but with some caveat, which is like being able to control it within maybe their environment or white labeling it maybe. But then at least the startup can, survive, or it could actually generate revenue and, and keep building it out. And it's interesting.
So I was just thinking, maybe if you can share with us, it doesn't have to be right now, but we can share it with our network on LinkedIn about what is the stack that you would recommend to a clean slate client?
Sure, yeah. So I could break it out based on types in terms of like design, engineering, and project management, product management. So for design, I would just recommend only really one tool. And that's just Figma. It does everything that
I like it
that you need. It's an entire product suite in itself. It consolidates so many. For how do you put this? Like for project management, product management, I would use Shortcut. That's what we fell in love with. It used to be called Clubhouse. Super fast, lightweight, easy to use tool that has tons of functionality for any kind of wikis or documentation, or you could even use it for general company directories. I would recommend Notion for that. It's really easy to use. You can customize it whatever way you want in terms of how you want to represent certain places for people to go to learn, to explore about the company or like your processes or documentation. It's like it's a catch-all. Communication, highly recommend Slack. We have all of our clients connected to it using Slack Connect. So it bridges our two organizations together to have seamless access to each other through comms. Recommend Google Workspace as a startup to get up and running. It has everything that you possibly could need, from video conferencing with Google Meets to calendar to email with Google Drive. It's perfect. In terms of where you have your code base, like we use Bitbucket, but you could use GitHub as well. If you want to get from a clean slate, I would probably use GitHub.
What about things like you mentioned before, Mixpanel, etc. So things for product analytics.
For product analytics, I've seen Optimizely and VWO be the best at it. If you want to do A/B testing, if you want to have product analytics, I would use like something like Mixpanel or Segment. And then if you want to, consolidate reporting, I would look at the Google Data Studio. And then by default, if you have a website, I would just recommend Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager. Google 360 is quite powerful. Like a lot of our scale-up clients use it.
Do you use any tool for road mapping?
Yeah, so I would recommend Roadmonk for that, roadmonk.com. That's what they bread and butter is. That's all they do.
Perfect.
Hope that helps.
Yeah, that absolutely does. This talk has been really relatable for me. The genesis of this podcast is around all the different products that are out there, trying to make sense of them, trying to understand, what is the best, what maybe, not so good. And these conversations are like just really fascinating to me. I get to understand like what other people are using across another agency. So this has been really helpful.
I'm sometimes I'm wondering if after more than 20 episodes, people are more less confused or more confused about
I know.
all the products that are available out there.
Right. And we only have a very small subset of those.
But also, as time goes by, there is always someone new coming up with something better. So we'll see how that will, what will happen in a year from now or more.
Totally.
Constantly evolving. That's for sure.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Aram, for coming to the show and talking with us. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, good question. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's a good place to start. Follow me or add me as a connection. And then I post a lot of information through our own podcast and through our own product innovation series on YouTube. So there's some links there. And yeah, I'm pretty responsive on LinkedIn. So I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah. What's the name of your show, your podcast?
Yeah, it's Product Innovation Series. And then the other one we have is called Off the Record with Aram. That's where I speak with VCs and serial CEOs who have taken a business to exit once or twice and have some like good insights to share.
Cool. That's the one I was checking out yesterday. So really enjoyed it.
Cool. Yeah, happy to hear that.
Well, perfect. Well, thanks again, Aram, so much for joining us today. Really do appreciate it, like I said. And to all the listeners, thank you for joining us on this show. And feel free to give us feedback on whatever app you're listening to us on.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.